They said the base kitchen always smelled like burnt coffee and pride. This morning a few recruits laughed at the old cook, mocked the faded ring glinting on his finger as the flag rope clinked outside. Then the general stepped in, paused mid-pour, the cup trembling, and everyone saw what the engraving meant. Quietly, the laughter stopped, replaced by the kind of silence that salutes a story still being told. The mess hall smelled of gravy and floor wax, that familiar blend only an army base could cook up. Fluorescent lights buzzed over metal trays and stainless steel counters. Harold Keene moved slowly but sure-handed, ladling mashed potatoes with a rhythm that came from years of repetition, not rush. His ring, plain silver edges worn, caught the light each time he reached for the ladle. "Hey, old-timer, what's that cheap ring for?" a voice called from halfway down the line. Laughter followed quick. He smiled. "Guess it's older than you, kid." The line snorted. One recruit elbowed another. "Did they even wear rings back in Vietnam, sir?" That got a louder laugh, then a hush. The "sir" wasn't meant respectful. It landed like a poke. Keene's hand rested on the counter. The ring glinted again. Small, steady sink. He wiped the ladle with a towel motion, deliberate. "People wore a lot of things back then," he said quietly. "Mostly responsibility." The room shifted. A fan clicked overhead. Somewhere near the coffee urn, a spoon hit a... Still the recruit pressed on. Voice lighter, now uncertain. "So what is it really?" "A class ring from, before Wi-Fi." A ripple of chuckles. Keene poured gravy unhurried. "From a unit that doesn't show up in your search bar," he said. "But that's all right." The kid blinked, not sure whether he'd been corrected or blessed. Behind Keene, the coffee machine hissed, filling the air with slow steam. The sound covered the silence that followed. Plates clattered farther down the line. Conversations picked back up softer now. Then one older Sergeant Gray at the temples stepped forward, tray in. H. Harold nodded. "Always glad to serve, Sergeant." It wasn't loud, but it carried. The recruits who'd laughed first now avoided eye contact, pretending to stir gravy or find forks. The ring caught the light once more, a quiet punctuation mark no one dared read out loud. He reached for a coffee cup. The steam rose between him and the room like a curtain drawing itself. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the normal rhythm returned, boots, trays, low talk. Harold lifted the mug, studying the swirl. Just heat and patience, he thought. Both reveal character. At the far end, the young recruit mumbled, "Sorry, sir." Keene looked up, soft grin back in place. "Eat before it gets cold." The boy obeyed. Outside sunlight hit the narrow window above the sink, catching the ring again, a flash too quick for anyone to name. But the camera of the moment, if such things existed, would hold on that glint. Then, silence. Only the hum of the warmer and the faint rustle of paper napkins. The lunch rush faded into the slow scrape of trays and the clink of silverware. In the kitchen's back corner, steam fogged the narrow window, turning the daylight into a blur. Harold Keene stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, the old ring glinting through soap bubbles each time he rinsed a pan. "Man, he still wears that thing," a recruit muttered, stacking plates. "You think it's like a college ring?" "Nah," another said, drying spoons with a towel. "My uncle's got one like it. Fraternity something." "Fraternity," the first scoffed. "Come on, he's ancient. That's probably from a grocery store prize box." Sergeant Leary glanced up from inventory sheets. "You boys done speculating, or do I need to make it an assignment?" Laughter thinned but didn't stop. From the sink came only the rhythm of metal meeting water. Keene didn't turn. He reached for another tray, eyes on the soap foam sliding off its edge. The radio on the shelf hummed through static until an old tune broke through, a 1960s ballad, weary but warm. The melody filled the quiet corners, the kind of song that slows down conversation without anyone noticing. Leary lowered his clipboard. You sure you earned that thing, Cook? The tone was half joking, half testing. Harold let the water run a second longer before answering. Earned and kept, he said. His voice held no edge, just even gravity. The younger men exchanged glances. One tried to smile. So, what's it stand for? He shut off the tap. For people who finished what they started. No one laughed this time. But Keene just kept washing pans. Soap hissed as he dipped another tray. The faint engraving on the ring caught the light, a tiny emblem nearly rubbed away the hint of wings. Or maybe flames. None of the recruits looked close enough to be sure. Leary cleared his throat. Okay, back to work. Dishes won't dry themselves. One of the recruits leaned toward the other. Wings. I swear I saw wings. More like a bird. Phoenix. They both shrugged, unsure why the word felt heavier than a guess. In the hall beyond the kitchen, footsteps echoed slow, polished shoes on tile. A junior officer popped his head through the doorway. Heads up, folks. General Vance arrives tomorrow. Big inspection. Leary nodded, already picturing the chaos. Copy that. The officer lingered a moment, noticing the cook by the sink. Everything squared away here. Harold looked over his shoulder, smile faint. Plates clean, sir. The officer grinned and left. The recruits fell silent again, listening to the last note of the radio song fade out. The silence stretched just long enough to sting. Leary set down his clipboard. You heard the man. Let's make sure this place shines, including the jokes. A few quiet yes sirs. Keene reached for a rag, drying the last pan. The ring caught one final beam from the window before disappearing under the cuff of his sleeve. Outside the mess hall, lights dimmed for the evening. Inside, rumor had already done its work. Less laughter, now, more curiosity. Morning brought the low hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of reheated coffee. Harold Keene unlocked the mess hall door before dawn, same as always. The place still held last night's chill, the kind of cold that made sound sharper. He moved with quiet habit, stacking trays, checking burners, humming under his breath. Steam rose as he filled the first pot. For a moment it curled between him and the window, turning his reflection into a ghost in fatigues. The ring flashed again when he set the pot down, tiny sparks of silver under the kitchen light. Private Miller slipped in early, pretending to check inventory. He'd been one of the quieter recruits yesterday, eyes open, mouth mostly shut. Morning, sir, he said, uncertain. Didn't think anyone beat me in. Keene smiled. Old habit. The coffee tastes better before the crowd. They worked in silence for a while. The only sound was the steady tap of water and the faint crackle of the radio warming up. Finally, Miller spoke again, voice soft. That ring of yours, sir. The guys keep guessing what it means. Keene didn't look up. And what's your guess? I thought maybe it's a unit thing. But it doesn't match anything in the manual. Keene wiped his hands on a towel, eyes still on the sink. Manuals don't cover everything, son. Miller nodded, pretending to check the mop bucket. Looks kind of like wings. Or fire. Keene's voice was mild. Memory has a way of mixing the two. The recruit waited for more, but the cook just turned back to the counter. Steam drifted between them, carrying the smell of strong coffee and metal. Outside, the first footsteps of the morning echoed through the hall. Miller hesitated. Were you really there, sir? Back then? Keene set down the pot with deliberate care. I was somewhere, he said. Long time ago. Different kind of kitchen. He reached for a stack of cups, the ring glinting again, engraving clearer, now faint wings, a trace of flame. The metal caught the yellow light and threw it back like a promise too heavy to explain. Miller swallowed, unsure whether to speak. The others don't mean disrespect. They just don't know. I know, Keene said gently. That's how learning starts. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was respectful. A pause shaped like understanding. A moment later, the radio finished tuning itself. A few notes of brass filled the room, something military, something slow. Keen poured 2 cups. Coffee. Yes, sir. Then take a seat. The day's about to get noisy. They sat in the hush of early light, 2 generations divided by decades and joined by steam and caffeine. The ring rested between them on the edge of Keen's knuckle, catching the glow from the pot like an ember refusing to die. Still no answers. Then boots. Heavy, certain, echoing down the hallway. The sound grew louder until it filled the doorway like a drum roll no one wanted to stop. General Vance had arrived. Morning rolled in bright and sharp, the kind of light that made the mess hall look almost ceremonial. Metal-gleamed boots echoed, and the smell of burnt toast drifted under the hum of discipline. Private Miller wiped down tables twice, nerves humming. General Vance was coming for breakfast. Harold Keen moved behind the counter, calm as ever. He wore the same faded apron, same plain ring. Steam rose from the coffee urn in thin silver threads. The recruits whispered but kept their heads low this time. When the door opened, conversation snapped silent. General Vance entered, uniform crisp metals precise. His voice carried authority wrapped in old weariness. "Morning, gentlemen." He reached the counter. Keen turned with a mug already poured. "Coffee, sir, please." The general accepted it, nodding his thanks. His eyes drifted down, then stopped. That ring. He froze, mug halfway to his lips. The recruits sensed it before they understood it. The room's hum dropped to nothing. "Where did you get this ring?" he asked quietly. The question landed like a thunderclap wrapped in velvet. Keen glanced at his hand as if seeing it for the first time. "Kept it from a long time ago, sir." Vance's breath hitched. "This insignia." He looked closer. The faint engraving wings and flame glowed beneath the fluorescent light. "It belonged to my father's unit." A silence followed so deep it seemed to slow the air. Then the room froze. The general set down the mug with deliberate care. "Sergeant Major Harold Keen," he said, the title forming itself from memory more than rank. "You were with the Phoenix detail." Keen's jaw tightened. "Most days I just cooked, sir." "No," Vance said softly, shaking his head. "You saved them. You saved him." A ripple moved through the line of recruits like wind across grass. The hierarchy that had stood ironclad moments ago trembled. The general straightened. "Men," he said, voice low but firm, "you were serving a hero." No one moved. Trays hung in midair. Steam curled upward, as if saluting. Vance took one step back and snapped to attention. His salute was crisp, flawless, the kind of gesture that rewrites a room. Keen didn't move at first. For 40 years he'd carried the weight of protocol, the quiet expectation to stay small. But now the rules bent. He was pinned by protocol no longer. He lifted his hand slowly, returning the salute. The motion wasn't triumph, it was closure. Around them the recruits followed suit, unsure but compelled. Metal spoons and trays clattered to rest like punctuation. Vance's voice broke the quiet. "Sir, where did you get this ring?" he repeated softer, as though still convincing himself the man was real. Keen's answer came with a half-smile. From someone who believed duty didn't end when the war did. The general nodded once, eyes glassed with respect. "Then I'll drink to that." He raised the cup, trembling slightly, and the mess hall exhaled. The room, once ordinary, now felt like holy ground. The morning after felt different, cleaner somehow, as if the air itself had stood at attention. Light slanted through the mess hall blinds, hitting the serving counter like a stripe of honor. The coffee urn hissed, steady and proud. Harold Keen stood behind the line again, back straight, sleeves rolled. Same apron, same ring. Only now everyone saw it. No one barked orders. No laughter bounced off the steel walls. The recruits lined up quietly, trays in hand, their faces open but solemn. Each man paused at the serving window. The first to step forward was Private Miller. He placed his tray down, met Keen's eyes, then reached toward the counter, where a small stand held an old photograph, and the ring now resting on a folded napkin polished bright. He touched it lightly with one finger. The gesture wasn't dramatic. It was grateful. One by one, the others followed. No speeches, no ceremony. Just the sound of boots scuffing and metal trays setting down like low percussion beneath a hymn. Sergeant Leary broke the silence halfway through. "Coffee's finally hot today," he muttered, half a grin forming. "Guess we're celebrating." The recruits chuckled softly, careful not to break the spell. Keene lifted a brow. "Told you it just needed patience." But no one laughed too loud. The rhythm of the room changed again, quieter, slower, almost reverent. Each tray clink felt like punctuation in a shared apology. Community Echo Number 1 had arrived not through orders, but through silence. At the far end, Miller lingered, watching the steam rise from his cup. He said, "Sir, you gonna keep that ring up there?" Keene shook his head. "It's not mine alone anymore." The boy nodded, thoughtful. Outside, a flag flapped once in the wind. The sound carried faintly through the open doorway, blending with the hum of the fluorescent lights. A soft march theme drifted from the radio, the same one that had played during inspections decades ago. It filled the space between breaths. The kitchen smelled of coffee and humility. Vance's voice came from the doorway, gentler than before. "Mr. Keene, you've started something good here." Keene wiped his hands on his apron. "Didn't start it, sir. Just reminded them it existed." The general nodded once, no salute this time, only respect, plain and quiet. Then he left the men to their breakfast. Keene leaned against the counter, letting the noise of forks and small talk return in waves. The weight that had lived in his shoulders for years loosened. He poured himself a cup, watching the steam spiral upward, soft and silver. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone in the memory. The kitchen went quiet. Not empty, but full. The mess hall was almost empty again. Evening light bled through the narrow windows, soft and amber, brushing the tables with warmth the fluorescent bulbs could never make. The rush hours were done. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the ticking of the wall clock remained. Harold Keene sat at the far table, the same one where recruits once joked too loud. His apron hung on a hook by the door. He wasn't working tonight. He was remembering. A shadow crossed the doorway. Private Miller stepped in, still in uniform, but without the nervous shuffle of before. He held two steaming mugs carefully, as though one false move might spill more than coffee. "Evening, sir," he said softly. "Figured you'd still be here." Keene smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "Couldn't quite leave. The place gets quiet after the dishes stop clattering." Miller set one cup in front of him. "From the good batch," he said, half grinning. "The one you keep hidden from the rest of us." Keene chuckled. "Guess it's time you learned the secret. Patience and a clean filter." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes easy only after respect has settled in. On the table between them lay an envelope, thick and old. Keene tapped it with one finger. "You might as well take this down to the board tomorrow. General said the new display goes up at 9. Miller looked puzzled. "What is it?" Keene slid it toward him. Inside, a black and white photo rested against yellowed paper. A team of 6 men stood beside a field tent, faces sunburned and grinning. One of them, barely recognizable under youth and grit, was Keene. His hand even then rested on the shoulder of another soldier. All of them wore matching rings, small glints catching the camera flash. "The Phoenix detail," Keene said quietly. "Your general's father took that picture. I never saw a print until last week." Miller studied it, awe softening his voice. "You should be the one putting this up, sir." Keene shook his head. "Heroes belong to the past. Teachers belong to the present. Guess I've switched roles." Miller's eyes lingered on the ring still shining on Keene's hand. "You keeping that one?" Keene hesitated. He turned the ring slowly between his fingers. Memory doesn't stay by holding on, he said finally. It stays by passing through. He slid the ring next to the photo. The metal gleamed in the low light, almost breathing. For a moment, the steam from their mugs rose and tangled with the reflection, creating a shimmer that looked alive. Take them both, Keene said. Put them where everyone can see. Let it remind folks that service doesn't always make headlines. Miller swallowed throat tight. Yes, sir. They sat in silence after that. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Outside, the day folded itself into dusk. Through the window, the flagpole caught the last amber glow before turning silver under the early evening lamps. Keene took a long sip of coffee. It's funny, he murmured, voice low, how the small things last longer than medals. A cup, a song, a ring. Miller looked down at his own cup, then at the photo again. He nodded. Maybe because people pass them on. Keene smiled, pride hidden behind humility. Maybe so. The room filled with the soft march from the hallway speakers, an instrumental version of America the Beautiful. Not loud, just enough to weave through the clinking cups and the hum of the lights. Miller stood after a while, tucking the envelope under his arm. He saluted, not crisp, not showy, but steady. Thank you, sir, for, well, everything. Keene rose slower, returning the salute. No need for thanks, just keep listening. He gestured toward the plaqueboard in the hallway beyond. Every story needs a listener. That's how they live. Miller nodded again and turned toward the door. As he stepped into the corridor, the camera of the moment would have caught the reflection of light from the photo's frame, merging with the coffee's surface, a small, trembling glow like a legacy breathing. Keene watched him go, the rhythm of his boots fading down the hall. He sat back down, eyes soft. He poured the last of his cup into the sink and let the water run. In the silence that followed, his voice barely above a whisper carried through the empty kitchen. Everyone you meet has a story. You just have to listen. The radio clicked off. The lights dimmed one by one until only the plaqueboard glowed in the hall, the photo and ring, now part of the station's living memory. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the flag, and the evening settled warm, complete.